Do you hate politics? Do you avoid people that live and breathe politics? If you said yes, you shouldn't move to any of the states on this list. Welcome back to World According to Briggs and a video about the most politically engaged states. Now, first of all, before we get in this list, I promise you, by the end, you'll be surprised at some of them. A couple weeks back, we did a video about the least politically active states. Today, we're doing the other side of that coin. As we learned in our video probably about a month and a half ago, What's Destroying the United States video, most people think politics is killing this country. More specifically, the political zealots. They can't quit talking about politics. They think if you don't vote the same way they do, you're obviously insane or you hate the country. Look at any video on YouTube about almost anything, and you'll see someone in the comment section blaming a political party for something, like it's a cupcake channel and they're blaming people on the price of frosting or something. I'm not saying being politically engaged, active, or just aware is bad. When you start hating people and getting angry at someone because they vote differently than you, that's a problem. Democracy, good or bad, is a team sport. We're all in this together, no matter how much the media and politicians want you to think that we're in this life and death struggle for the control of the United States. Today's video is simple. We're ranking the states by voter turnout in the 2020 election, according to each state's election board or Secretary of State's website. One thing I want to say about the last video, I said Virginia was the highest. It's not actually the highest. I was talking about the turnout rate between the 18 and 24-year-olds and the 64 and above. I was going over that video for this video and I made it sound like I was saying that Virginia has the highest turnout. That's not what I was saying. Anyway, all right, let's see which states do have the highest turnout rate and the highest politically active population. Number 10, Ohio. Ohio always has a good turnout rate. This is a swing state. If you don't know what that is, it's a state that really can't be counted on by either party. Now, this changes over the decades, but for the most part, Ohio is usually a swing state. No matter who wins, it's usually pretty close in Ohio. From 2004 to 2012, they're pretty much nail biters, and they get a solid turnout every single time. In the 2020 election, Ohio had 8.7 million eligible voters in their population, and of those, 6.7 actually showed up at the polls, giving them a 77.04% voter turnout. And if you look at two of the most sought after age demographics, the 18 to 24-year-olds, about 40.1% of their population of that age showed up, and the 64 and over, 74% of them showed up. Now, the 18 to 24-year-olds, that dropped a little bit in past elections. It was about 45 to 46%. The 64 and over, that always is like right around 75% for them. When polled, voters said their biggest things they vote for, healthcare and jobs in Ohio. Number 9, North Dakota. Now, some states, like North Dakota, really don't have that much pull when it comes to an election year. That's because they don't have a lot of people. They only have 3 electoral votes, which Ohio, that we just spoke about, they get 18 votes. But North Dakota has a pretty good turnout rate. 77.16% of their population shows up. The 18 to 24-year-olds, about 37% of them show up. The 64 and up, 77% of them show up. When polled, they say that their biggest concerns and why they vote are the economy and welfare. Now, when it's welfare, it could be either way. Welfare reform, or they want more welfare. It's just welfare in general. Number 8, Maine. The Caribou State has an older population, and they show up at the polls. And if you are typing out your comment about the Caribou State, I know it's the Pine Tree State. I just like to call it the Caribou State for some reason. There's a lot of different reasons people show up at the polls at Maine, but mostly it's their age bracket. I mean, when you get a little bit older, you start caring about politics a little bit more and you start voting more. At least that's what statistics show us. I also think Maine gets a good turnout because elections are normally in November, and if you're in Maine, it's usually covered in snow around November. What else is there to do? You might as well go vote. You put a parka on, put some snowshoes on, and head out to the polls. If you ever go to Maine during the winter, you'd think that global warming is their issue, not to stop global warming. They'd like to speed it up a little bit. 77.4% of Maine showed up at the polls in the 2020 election. Of that 18 to 24-year-olds, only 49.9% of them showed up. The 64 and older crowd, 82% of those people showed up. Now, Maine has 4 electoral college votes. They're one of the only states that actually split theirs. So if in the 2020 election, 3 went for Biden and 1 went for Trump. Personal opinion, I think that's how all states should be. I mean, you take like Oregon. They got 7 electoral college votes, and half the state, the eastern part, I'm sure would have gone Republican. Same goes for California, Washington, and just about every other state. In 2020, Maine had just over 1 million registered voters, and of them, 832,000 showed up to the polls. Their biggest concerns are healthcare, which is normally a thing when you have an older population, also government spending. Number 7, Montana. Montana has a pretty good turnout rate, and a lot of that has to do with they're not a very populous state. Not a lot of people living here. But these people are very into state rights, the Second Amendment. Those are two of their biggest concerns when they go to the polls. 77.5% of their population showed up at the polls in the 2020 election. They had about 827,000 registered voters, and about 640,000 showed up to vote. Not bad. Of the 18 to 24-year-old crowd, 33% of them showed up, while 64 and up crowd, about 78.1. Again, the older population likes to get out and vote. They're another state that only has 3 electoral college votes because they don't have a big population. In case you're wondering, that changes, and that's why the census is so important. When a state starts losing population and another one gains it, they start giving it more electoral college votes, and it's a whole big process I'm not going to get into, but that's why the census, one of the reasons at least, why the census is so important. Number 6, New Hampshire. The Granite State comes in at number 6, and they like to go to the polls. Again, not a very populated state, but they are a swing state. They go back and forth. This last time, they were all on board with the Democrats. They picked up 4 electoral votes here. In recent years, they've had a little shift. They've kind of had a little bit lower of the older population getting out. In past elections, it was like 77 and 78%. This last one, the 64 and older, it was 73.2% got out and voted. The 18 to 24-year-olds, that's up. That went up to 41%. In the 2016 election, it was 36%. So that's a little bit of a shift there. I read a political blog not too long ago, and the guy was talking about how New Hampshire, there's a lot of friction building on where the state is leaning these days, and it's starting to affect citizens, and they're getting a little at each other's throat. At least this was his opinion. Same thing's going on in Arizona. Things are shifting there. The younger people are voting more, and more of the first-time registered voters at like 18 are going blue, as in Democrats. But 78.2% of New Hampshire residents got out and voted in the 2020 election. Their biggest concern? State rights and healthcare. And they have 4 electoral college votes. Number 5, Maryland. That's right, the first state likes to get out and vote. First thing I should tell you is they're not the first state. They're actually the old Line State, or Little America they've been known as. But their official nickname is the Free State. And in the Free State, you're free to get out and vote, and these people do. 78.62% of their population got out and voted in the 2020 election. Maryland has a good amount of electoral college votes. It's a small state. I mean, it's ranked 42nd in area, but in population, they're 18th. They have a ton of people living in this state. Actually, they have a total of 6.1 million residents, almost 6.2. You have Baltimore here, and you also have the DC metro area. Now, Washington, DC is actually the District of Columbia. It's its own thing, but all the surrounding, College Park, Bethesda, Silver Springs, Chevy Chase, Maryland, all that metro area is part of Maryland. Maybe being so close to the nation's capital is what gets them so politically involved. Whatever the reason, they are involved. 78.62% of Maryland's population got out and voted in the 2020 election. Of the 18 to 24-year-old crowd, listen to this, 54.1%. That's one of the highest. And of the 64 and older, 68%. That's actually one of the lowest. Like a youth movement going on in the Free State. Maryland has 10 electoral college votes. Got a lot of people there, like I said. Number 4, Oregon. The Beaver State likes to vote because it's really easy here to vote. It's all done by mail. There's no polling booths or anything like that. You don't have to go someplace to vote. You just send it in. A lot of people say that's where a lot of the fraud comes from, but they've done investigation after investigation, and they maybe find a couple people that voted for like a dead relative or something like that every single year, but nothing major. Ever. It's one of the safest election systems in the country. 79.8% of Oregon's population got out and voted in the 2020 election. Of that population, the 18 to 24-year-olds, that was 48.8% of them, and the 64 and above, 75% of them showed up at the polls or sent their paper in from their house. But Oregon is a perfect example of why we need to split our electoral votes, because honestly, just my opinion, I have no real hard facts, just kind of what I know about the state. I would say in this last election, 5 would have gone to the Democrats and the Republicans would have picked up too, because the eastern side of the state is very much conservative Republican. They don't have that many people out there. They don't get any electoral votes. One interesting thing about Oregon and liberal and conservative, everyone seems to think that being such a liberal state, nobody in this state has guns. No, one of their biggest political concerns is the Second Amendment. Oregon, the whole state, not just the conservative side, they love their guns. They're one of the most gun-friendly states in the union, along with Vermont. Like, the pinnacle of liberalism is one of the most gun-toting states we got too. Number 3, Mississippi. These people like to get out and vote. Now, the state's pretty much a mess in most cases, but I do think lately, in the last couple years, it is a great place for remote workers. It is dirt cheap. Almost everywhere you go in Mississippi, you can find cheap rent, cheap housing, low cost of living, anything you want. If you're bringing a job with you, why not? As more and more small towns get internet, it's a great option. But 88.34% of the people living there right now like to go to the polls. 18 to 24-year-olds, about 46% of them showed up, and the 64 and over crowd, 77% showed up. Now, the largest gain they've gotten in recent decades is the 18 to 24-year-olds. In the late 90s, early 2000s, they had some election cycles where it was like in the low 30s, high 20s for the 18 to 24-year-old turnout. With so many people voting, how's the state in that bad a shape? Shouldn't they all get together and just start voting for better politicians? Look at any mayor in any one of the cities in that state, and they'll be all, I don't know what's going on up at the state. That's how they all seem to feel about the state government in Mississippi, and it's sucked since the Civil War. Before that. But Mississippi has 6 electoral college votes, and I don't care if they split them or not. I'm sure all 6 would go to the Republicans every single cycle, at least for the foreseeable future. Their biggest concerns are state rights, employment, and poverty, which should be a concern in Mississippi because they got a lot of it. Number 2, Minnesota. This one blew me away. I had no idea they even cared about politics in Minnesota, but apparently they do because they get out and vote. It's another cold state, so you know they love politics if they're getting out to vote in this state. A lot of Minnesotans vote by mail. This is one of those states that there's no excuse required. If you want a mail-in ballot, you just have to request it and they'll give it to you. That's unlike Oregon where it's just 100% mail-in. But every single election, Minnesotans head to the polls. 82.96% showed up at the 2020 election. Of that, the 18-24-year-old crowd, 54.3% showed up, and the 64 and over, 76.2%. That's a pretty high number for the youth movement, at least. Now, one thing I found interesting about this whole type of video and the research I was doing, they always list the different things that people are concerned with. One of the things we all keep hearing that everyone's concerned with election integrity, and everyone wants to be concerned about the elections. Less than 3% listed that as something they're concerned with, and politicians keep telling us we're worried about election integrity. Over 90% of the country has bigger worries than the election integrity issue that they keep talking about. Minnesota has 10 electoral college votes. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link down below. We'd love it if you went over and subscribed, watch a few videos, leave me a couple comments. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, New Jersey. Mind blown. I didn't think they cared about politics in New Jersey. New Jersey isn't a swing state. Nobody's really concerned with what's going on in New Jersey. I mean, it's a state that does have 14 electoral college votes. So, I mean, that's a concern if you're a politician, I guess, running for the presidency. Now, this is interesting when you break it down to the age demographics because not a lot of older folks and a good amount of younger folks show up, but nothing record-setting. It's that middle area, above 24 and below 64, that they actually get out and vote more than most any other state. Because when it comes to the 18 to 24-year-olds, 40.7% got out and voted the 2020 election, and the 64 and over, 68% got out and voted. The only one that's equal to that is Maryland on this list. That's a low number for that age bracket. In New Jersey, they care about healthcare, jobs, and education. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, be nice to each other.